Tonight, from defense to offense, how the Conservative leader is responding to allegations he got an assist from foreign agents. What the intelligence reveals.
I won the leadership fair and square.
What his adversaries say about his refusal to take security clearance.
I find it downright irresponsible.
And how Pierre Poilievre is firing back with an accusation of his own. A pledge to shore up defense.
Rebuild, reinvest, and rearm.
What's in the Liberals' plan and what's not?
We still have outstanding shopping lists.
Hey, no!
The Palestinian Oscar-winning documentarian speaking out after he says he was attacked by Israeli settlers.
I was so scared.
Plus, the eyes in the sky that prevented a larger disaster in a fatal BC backcountry avalanche.
We would have been looking at an even more tragic event.
And an awkward masked moment. A Canadian champion's true character takes flight.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening. From housing to defense to social programs, multiple critical issues emerged on the campaign trail today, but one dominated. Pierre Poilievre forced to respond to allegations India meddled in the Conservative leadership race and that Canada's intelligence service couldn't tell him about it because he doesn't have security clearance. And that is where our election coverage begins tonight on this day 3 with CTV's senior political correspondent Michael Couture.
Ready to build some homes? Oh, yeah.
The Conservative leader was ready to talk about affordable homes, but questions persist about Pierre Poilievre having his own house in order when it comes to foreign interference. CTV News has confirmed that India attempted to interfere in the 2022 Conservative leadership contest, which Poilievre won. There's no indication the meddling affected the outcome of the race.
I won the leadership fair and square.
CSIS didn't share the information with Poilievre because he refused to get the necessary security clearances to receive classified briefings on foreign interference in Canada, something his opponents seized on.
I find it downright irresponsible that the leader of the opposition, day after day, month after month, year after year, refuses to obtain his security clearance.
That, to me, disqualifies you as a prime minister candidate. It's not someone that we can trust to stand up to foreign interference.
Poilievre defended his decision to not take briefings, saying it would hamper his abilities to hold the government to account.
So they'll bring me into a dark room and they'll say, we're going to give you a little bit of breadcrumbs of intel, and then we'll tell you you can't talk about any of this stuff anymore.
However, the former national security advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says being briefed on foreign interference would not muzzle Poilievre.
So holding the government to account, you can do without revealing top secret information or secret information. And he should be able to do both of those things.
Poilievre insists he's already had a security clearance because he was a minister in the Harper government a decade ago.
He is saying should be good enough. It doesn't work that way. Clearances don't last for that long. I think he's past the date for that. So,
still, Poilievre won't waver, focusing all of his attacks on Liberal leader Mark Carney at a rally of thousands in Hamilton tonight. Omar.
All right, Mike, thank you. Let's bring in CTV's chief political correspondent, Vassy Kapelos. Vassy, questions about Pierre Poilievre's refusal to get security clearance have persisted for a while and are now clearly a part of this campaign. What impact could this have on the election?
Well, I think the time when those questions first arose a number of months ago was a very different time in the greater political context. Pierre Poilievre had a lot of political capital to expand because he was 20 to 25 points ahead of the Liberals. The situation is very different now. Plus, there's a lot of policy convergence between the Liberals and the Conservatives, which means greater focus on the leaders themselves. And anytime there is a question of leadership to be debated on the merits of it or not, the fact that that question is being raised potentially has an impact going forward.
And right after those revelations today, the Conservatives brought up the Liberal leaders' connections with China. What was the link they were trying to draw there, and what was the Liberal response?
So here's what the Conservatives say, Omar. They say after being appointed to head Justin Trudeau's task force on economic growth, Mark Carney went to China, met with the deputy head of the People's Bank of China, and then 2 weeks later, Brookfield Asset Management, so he chairs the board of that company at the time, received a $250 million preferential loan from a Chinese state bank. So that's what the Conservatives say. We asked the Liberals for a response. They said in part in a statement, this is a desperate attempt by Pierre Poilievre to distract from the fact that he refuses to get his security clearance at a time of crisis for Canada. They did not, however, address the substance of exactly what the Conservatives are accusing Carney of. So I anticipate there will be questions on the campaign trail for Mr. Carney on this very thing tomorrow. Omar?
All right, Vashi, thank you. Pierre Poilievre also answered a longstanding question about whether he would keep federal programs on dental care and child care if he wins the election.
We will protect these programs, and no one who has them will lose them.
Poilievre said dental care will continue for those who have it, but did not say if planned expansions will take place. And on childcare, he said he would expand the options for parents. Both the Conservatives and the NDP are making a pitch to help Canadians with the housing crisis. CTV's Rachel Aiello now on the new promises and whether they'll actually work.
The persisting challenge Canadians are facing in finding places to call home at a price they can afford has emerged early as a top issue on the federal campaign trail. Today, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre announced an expansion of his pledge to remove the GST from new homes under $1 million to include homes priced up to $1.3 million.
Now, $1 million is not enough to get the average home in many markets. It's almost surreal, isn't it?
Yesterday in Montreal, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh visited the same shovel-ready vacant land he stood on during the 2021 election to make a point about Liberal inaction on affordable housing. There, he promised to set aside 100% of suitable federal land to build more than 100,000 rent-controlled homes by 2035. Today, Singh met with a renter about her challenges as a tenant in downtown Toronto.
But I couldn't afford to move and stay in this neighborhood.
I'm going to fight like hell to make sure you don't have to live in that fear and that worry.
Before calling the election, Mark Carney said he'd offer first-time homebuyers a similar GST relief to what the Conservatives are proposing. But on the trail, the Liberals haven't unveiled any fresh housing proposals yet.
I'm just going to ask for your patience for a couple of more days. We need to build affordable housing.
With homes in Canada costing roughly 3 times more than middle-class Canadians can afford, experts caution there's no quick fix and say Canadians should assess parties' entire housing plans once they're released.
There's only treating housing like a long-term infrastructure issue and making policies that will last longer than one term of government.
While Singh's announcement today was housing focused, he did not make any new policy commitments. This at a time when the foundation of the NDP support appears to be on shaky ground. Omar?
All right, Rachel, thank you. Liberal leader Mark Carney unveiled his party's defense policy today, promising to bolster the ranks and stand up for Canada's sovereignty. But as CTV's Judy Trin explains, it was big on the promises of hardware and soft on the numbers.
Standing in front of a wall of workers responsible for building the next generation of warships, Mark Carney said a Liberal government would protect Canada by relying more on itself, not the United States.
We're over the shock of the betrayal, but we should never forget the lessons.
The Liberal defense policy promises to boost naval resources by building more submarines and heavy icebreakers to defend the North, and to also build both aerial and aquatic drones to patrol Arctic skies and waters. He also wants to give soldiers a raise. The better pay would hopefully boost recruitment. The Canadian forces currently face a shortage of 14,500 members.
Defense spending has more than doubled in the last decade, but it's not enough for the new environment we're in. And that's why today I'm announcing my plan to rebuild, reinvest, and rearm.
After the shipyard visit, Carney toured a marine research facility but did not provide any costing to his plan. Analysts say the Liberal promises are useless if the government cannot speed up procurement and change the parameters to allow Canadian companies to compete.
I think it would be fair to say that we still have outstanding shopping lists of things that have not been delivered for the previous 2 or 3 governments.
Carney says he will streamline procurement and use Canadian suppliers. At his final stop in Halifax, Carney greeted a political soldier returning to the front lines. Former Housing Minister Sean Fraser, who decided not to run the same day Chrystia Freeland refused to deliver the fall economic statement, says he's changed his mind.
The impact of the potential trade war on jobs in my own community made me feel like I wanted to do something to serve.
The Liberals say they will provide details about how they will pay for their defense initiatives when they release their full platform. But for now, Mark Carney says his government is committed to reaching the 2% NATO target by 2030. Judy Trin, CTV News, Muscatawbin Harbor, Nova Scotia.
And Carney has apologized for an awkward moment while listing off some of his candidates. He mispronounced the last name and got the school wrong when speaking about an École Polytechnique survivor.
Natalie Pronovost, who, out of the tragedy of the shootings at Concordia, became a social justice activist.
Nathalie Provost was hit by 4 bullets in the École Polytechnique massacre and became an advocate for gun control. A gunman killed 14 women at the Montreal school in 1989. Late tonight, Donald Trump's national security advisor Mike Walls took responsibility for an extraordinary security breach on a group chat he admitted to organizing after top intelligence officials were grilled today. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbin now on that damage control. Joy.
Omar, Democrats are calling this amateur hour, demanding an investigation into how sensitive war plans were discussed on a group chat involving top Trump intelligence officials and a journalist. At an intelligence hearing, Democrats slammed the Trump administration for what it calls a stunning security breach, in which Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth detailed targets, timing, operational details about the U.S. bombing campaign against Houthi rebels. Trump's newly minted intelligence officials took the brunt of it.
This was not only sloppy, it not only violated all procedures, but if this information had gotten out, American lives could have been lost.
There was no classified material that was shared in that
So then if there was no classified material, share it with the committee. This is our national security.
Democrats want heads to roll and Hegseth fired. Even some Republicans are upset.
It was incredibly sloppy. But that being said, I think it was a mistake.
But President Donald Trump dismissed the leak as just a glitch, standing by his man, Mike Walls, his national security advisor, who reportedly was the one who added the journalist, Jeffrey Goldberg, to the chat.
The attack was totally successful. It was, I guess, from what I understand, took place during, and it wasn't classified information. So this was not classified. Now, if it's classified information, it's probably a little bit different. But I always say you have to learn from every experience. I think it was very unfair the way they attacked Michael.
The White House is trying to contain the fallout, shifting the blame to the journalist, calling for an investigation into how Goldberg was added to this sensitive chat in the first place. He's consulting with lawyers and said there could be more to come. Omar?
All right, Joy Malbin in Washington tonight. Thanks. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says he's joining his wife on a controversial trip to Greenland, which had already been slammed by the island's leaders after Donald Trump suggested the U.S. was eyeing a takeover.
And you know, there was so much excitement around Usha's visit to Greenland this Friday that I decided that I didn't want her to have all that fun by herself, and so I'm going to join her.
And in other news, Ukraine and Russia have agreed to stop fighting in the Black Sea after separate talks with the U.S. in Saudi Arabia. If it works out, it would represent the clearest progress toward a wider ceasefire since the conflict began 3 years ago. The Palestinian co-director of the Oscar-winning documentary No Other Land says he was beaten by Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank and detained overnight by Israeli soldiers.
Hey, no!
Back to the car! Back to the car!
They came, the soldiers, with the settlers attacking me and beating me and destroyed me.
Hamdan Balal described the events from a hospital after being released. Balal saw a group of settlers attacking a village. He claims they came after him when he used his camera to document the incident. The Israeli military says it arrived to Israelis and Palestinians throwing rocks at one another. 3 people were arrested, including Bilal. Coming up, a deadly BC avalanche.
We obviously are crushed by what's happened.
Why a quick-thinking pilot is being praised for his actions. Plus, what caused major delays at one of Canada's busiest airports. We are learning more about the 3 victims killed in an avalanche while skiing in BC's backcountry. But as CTV's BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson tells us, a last-second warning likely prevented a far greater tragedy.
The world-famous powder in BC's Purcell Mountains is a skier's dream, but yesterday the experience ended in tragedy.
We obviously are crushed by what's happened.
RCMP say 2 groups of skiers being guided by stellar heli-skiing were waiting to be picked up by a helicopter. That's when the pilot, still in the air, noticed an avalanche barreling toward the skiers and sounded an alarm.
It's one of the first times I've seen that happen where someone was able to observe and then warn those on the ground. And I honestly, I think if that didn't happen, we would have been looking at an even more tragic event.
One group got out of the way in time. 4 other skiers were swept away. When rescue teams dug them out, it was too late for 3 of them.
We were just unable to generate a pulse or any signs of life.
The victims are 44-year-old Jeff Keenan from Whistler, BC, 45-year-old Alex Pashley of Idaho, and a local guide from Stellar Heli-Skiing who was 53. A 4th man was airlifted to hospital. The tragedy is being felt deeply in ski country.
Caslow is smaller than a Vancouver city block in terms of the number of people. So we all know each other. And it's very, very challenging for a community who has lost a friend.
The avalanche risk right now across most of the province is high. Stellar Heli-Skiing says for its guests, safety comes first.
We have a daily morning meeting where we make a determination about going into the field. At any point in time, if we feel it's not safe to do so, we do not.
The company says it is pausing future trips while RCMP and the BC Coroner's Service investigate. Andrew Johnson, CTV News, Vancouver.
Passengers at Montreal's Trudeau Airport faced major delays lasting all day today.
The flight was already gone, so our trip is kaput.
The airport says a connectivity problem at check-in and security caused the slowdown, frustrating travelers. Air Canada and Sunwing were most affected. Still ahead, why Ottawa is pulling the plug on Tesla's electric vehicle rebates. Transport Canada is freezing rebate payments for Tesla until each claim is individually investigated. The move comes after revelations the EV maker suspiciously filed for rebates. As CTV News reported, 4 Tesla locations in Canada submitted paperwork for the sale of 8,600 vehicles over a 72-hour period in the final days of the rebate program in January, amounting to more than $40 million in claims. The automaker has also been barred from future programs. Transport Minister Chrystia Freeland said today, quote, so long as the illegitimate and illegal U.S. tariffs are imposed against Canada. The carbon tax became one of the major issues in the lead up to the election campaign. And next week, Canadians will start to see some savings after the consumer portion is dropped. CTV's Kathy Lee looks into where it goes from here.
Passion turned into business. Gordon Fontaine's kiosk is a vibrant collage of traditional Italian staples.
We focus on olive oil and balsamic vinegar.
The entrepreneurial life has its ups and downs. Fontaine says the consumer carbon tax contributing to those challenges.
It's affecting our bottom line for sure. We're cooking with gas. We're using gas to deliver all our products or diesel.
What looked to be a carbon tax election has now changed. The issue appears to be less prominent since Mark Carney dropped the consumer carbon price, which will see prices fall on April 1st.
An expert says the average price decrease at the pumps for most of Canada will be about 19 cents a litre, but that won't last long.
2 weeks from April 1st, we have the switchover from winter to summer gasoline. That will see an increase net of about 6 cents a litre.
But there remains a political gap on the industrial carbon tax aimed at large emitters.
These would be facilities like oil sands facilities, electric generators.
The Liberals will keep it, the Conservatives will cut it, and instead expand clean technology tax credits.
If we are indeed trying to diversify our exports and export more products to more countries, it's doubly important right now that we do have an industrial carbon price.
The three other parties haven't officially released a carbon tax policy, but have supported green energy initiatives. In a statement, the NDP says it will make big polluters pay their fair share. Back at Sofrito, Fontaine will be watching the campaign closely.
Hopefully we can take them at their word that they're going to do what they say.
Optimistic the consumer carbon tax is gone for good. Kathy Lee, CTV News, Calgary.
A world champion Canadian curler had to put her best face on during an awkward and heartwarming moment on the team's flight home.
They're now also known as world champions.
That's Eva Miskew, part of a team that just claimed its second straight world championship in South Korea. She posted this video on Facebook, writing, "After a 13-hour flight home, I chose this moment for my airplane face mask. Thank you, Air Canada." And as you can see, Miskew handled the unexpected shout-out pretty well, even cracking a shy smile. Still ahead, our campaign checkup continues with voters in Hamilton, Ontario. Throughout this campaign, we're taking you across Canada to speak to voters about what issues matter most to them. Tonight, it's a city at the center of the trade war, Hamilton, Ontario, where we find CTV's John Venevali-Rao.
While Hamilton is home to major steel producers, historically shaping its economy and skyline, it's also billed as the city of waterfalls and a hotspot for young families fleeing Toronto for more affordable housing. And it's at this popular donut shop.
They're just classic. They're just the best classic donuts you can get.
That we asked Hamiltonians the question.
What is your top priority heading into this election that the politicians need to do?
Somebody who can stand up to Trump, definitely.
Make sure we stay Canada and not become one of the 51st states.
The tariff and border crisis, for sure.
As they served up donuts, Trump trumping all other issues. But what are some other priorities?
Taking care of the elderly. Like we need more homes, we need better care in the hospitals for as we age. And I'm aging, so I know I'm a little worried.
Many here also expressing concerns about the cost of living and inflation.
Shop owner Samantha Whips is worried about the price of ingredients going up and affordability issues in general.
The cost of living, really, honestly, for everybody, the cost, I mean, it trickles down to the business, obviously, so the cost for everything is honestly the biggest concern.
Customer Leo Cordova told us he's working 3 jobs to make ends meet, and he'd like to see the government somehow get wages up.
Everything's too expensive. Let's just put it that way.
With voters having lots to think about and digest ahead of Election Day. John Venevali-Rao, CTV News, Hamilton.
Donut looks good. It's a snapshot of this Tuesday for all of us at CTV National News. Thank you for watching. Good night and see you tomorrow.